On March 14th, many media outlets reported that the U.S. renewable and clean energy developer Invenergy will collaborate with China's photovoltaic giant, launching green energy to build a 5 gigawatts photovoltaic module factory in Ohio. The news sparked a heated debate online, with some arguing that the manufacturing costs in the US are high, others suggesting that the US government is deliberately causing trouble, and still others saying that even if the venture is profitable, it will ultimately be a wasted effort. From these comments, it is evident that most netizens are not optimistic about LONGi's prospects in establishing a joint venture factory in the US, and some even hold a negative view of the company. The main reason why many Chinese people are pessimistic about Chinese photovoltaic companies building factories in the US is related to the painful lessons experienced by the Chinese photovoltaic industry in the past. Hello everyone, I'm Sean, and today we're going to talk about Chinese photovoltaics going abroad. By 2009, Chinese photovoltaic companies had already entered markets around the world. At that time, the US was one of the major photovoltaic markets, and the subsidies were quite substantial, making the market highly competitive. Chinese photovoltaic companies chose to build factories in the US to gain more subsidies and enter the market. In November of that year, Wuxi Suntech announced an investment of $10 million to build a solar power plant in the US. The entry of Chinese technology companies into the US market was considered a big deal at the time, and many media outlets praised the Suntech and held high expectations for it. The US also showed great goodwill towards Wuxi Suntech. On one hand, photovoltaics represent green energy, which aligns with the US energy philosophy at the time. On the other hand, photovoltaics belong to the manufacturing sector, which can create jobs in the US and bring performance to local industries. As a result, Wuxi Suntech faced minimal interference when entering the US market. In 2010, Wuxi Suntech's US factory officially began production. At the opening ceremony, the local governor not only attended personally but also praised Suntech for promoting the local green economy and serving as a role model for the global photovoltaic industry. Suntech's US factory could be said to have been born with the golden key. In addition to Suntech, Chinese photovoltaic companies like Jiangxi Seiwei also made aggressive moves into the US market. In 2011, Seiwei spent $33 million to acquire 70% of a US solar company's shares and then invested in 2 photovoltaic companies, marking Seiwei's first attempt in the US. Other companies like Yingli, Trina Solar, and Jinko Solar also announced plans to set up factories in the US. However, within 2 to 3 years, Suntech and Seiwei's US factories went bankrupt. Why did these photovoltaic companies' plans to build factories in the US fail? One major reason is the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations launched by Europe and the US in October 2011. International photovoltaic giant SolarWorld and 6 US photovoltaic companies filed an application with the US Department of Commerce for anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations against Chinese photovoltaic companies. In 2012, the US Department of Commerce decided to impose tariffs of up to 254% on imported Chinese photovoltaic products. Furthermore, they also urged Europe to take action against Chinese photovoltaics. In 2013, the European Union made a similar decision, imposing high punitive tariffs on Chinese photovoltaic products. Europe and the United States are China's most important photovoltaic export markets, accounting for more than 85%. The sanctions imposed by Europe and the United States caused a significant trouble for China's photovoltaic industry at the time. Although China was the world's largest producer of photovoltaics at that time, it faced a significant drawback. Dependence on raw materials, equipment, technology, and even markets from other countries. In simple terms, Chinese factories were just the assembly factories at the time. The raw materials, equipment, and technology for China's photovoltaics and even the market were all from Europe and America. Chinese photovoltaic companies only processed and assembled the products and then exported them to be sold overseas. Chinese photovoltaic companies earned processing fees and hard-earned money, while the lion's share still went to European American companies. The larger China's photovoltaic industry grew, the more European American companies earned. Therefore, in the early stages of the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigation, some Chinese photovoltaic companies believed that the investigation was just a scare tactic, and some companies even disregarded it, continuing to expand their production capacity. As a result, after the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigation by Europe and the United States, photovoltaic companies now relied on the European and American markets and lacked core technology could not survive. In 2012 alone, more than 350 Chinese photovoltaic companies went bankrupt, including Wuxi Santec and Jiangxi Seiwei, whose factories in the United States naturally could not survive either. Since then, the first attempt by Chinese companies to build factories in the United States ended in failure. Why are Chinese photovoltaic companies trying to build factories in the United States again now? This has to do with the development of the Chinese photovoltaic industry. After the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigation by Europe and the United States, China's photovoltaic industry recognized its own problems and decided to solve them. Only by refining their internal skills could they better expand overseas. The first step was the localization of raw materials, silicon. There are three representative companies in this regard. The first is Huawei Company. Around 2005, the main raw material for photovoltaics was polycrystalline silicon, but over 95% of domestic polycrystalline silicon materials were imported, which were not only expensive, but also had technology strictly locked. Chinese polycrystalline silicon and photovoltaics faced the risk of being strangled. If China could not overcome polycrystalline silicon technology, Chinese photovoltaic companies could only buy polycrystalline silicon materials at high prices from abroad, and Chinese photovoltaics would not be able to transform from a major power to a strong one. Therefore, Chen Weiping, a senior engineer at China Chemical Hualu Company, was tasked with leading the team to tackle technical challenges. Without any technical assistance, they spent 3 years overcoming technical problems such as high pressure setup of the reduction furnace, cold hydrogenation, distillation, and tail gas recovery. In 2007, the country's first cold hydrogenation process was completed, officially ending the history of China's inability to mass produce thousands of tons of polycrystalline silicon. More importantly, the birth of this technology broke the blockade of Europe and America. They were willing to transfer the technology afterward. After that, another company stepped forward. It was GCL Poly. In 2013, they achieved a technological breakthrough in another process of polycrystalline silicon, developing a production technology of a silane fluidized bed method. Since then, both major technologies of polycrystalline silicon have been mastered by Chinese companies. The third company is even more legendary, LONGi Green Energy Technology. In 2013, LONGi was the first to achieve independent production of monocrystalline silicon, which has a higher light-emitting efficiency and quickly surpassed polycrystalline silicon to become the mainstream raw material for photovoltaics. Not only did LONGi master the production of monocrystalline silicon, but they also developed the diamond wire cutting process, increasing the cutting efficiency of silicon materials. It can be said that LONGi alone has changed the entire landscape of the photovoltaic industry. After years of development, China's photovoltaic industry has managed to overtake others in both straight and curved tracks. By 2020, China held 4,089 patents related to photovoltaic power generation, while the United States only had 149, a difference of 27 times. The disparity is even more exaggerated in terms of production capacity. There are four major links in the photovoltaic industry: silicon materials, silicon wafers, batteries, and components. China occupies an absolutely dominant position in all four links. In 2021, China's silicon wafer production capacity accounted for 97% of the global capacity, and the proportions of silicon materials, batteries, and components reached over 75%, capable of blocking the photovoltaic industry of any country. Today, photovoltaics have become the backbone of China's foreign trade, bringing in tens of billions of US dollars in foreign exchange each year. For years, Chinese photovoltaic companies not only withstood the pressure of the EU-US anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations, but they also broke free from technological blockades and gained an advantage over foreign companies. This is an inspiring story for all Chinese people, but the story doesn't end there. Initially, the EU and US anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations aim to suppress Chinese companies and support their own photovoltaic industries. As long as they could kill 1,000 enemies, even at the cost of losing 800 of their own, it would be acceptable. The fact proved that this method did not work. High costs and slow technological iteration were the main reasons for the failure of European American photovoltaic companies. The anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations did not change this fundamental problem. Instead, they forced Chinese photovoltaic companies to break through technologically and completely seize control of the supply chain of the entire industry. Without the high-priced raw materials from Europe and America, China's photovoltaic competitiveness climbed to a new level, gradually monopolizing the global photovoltaic industry. European American photovoltaic companies had to purchase key components from China. At this point, the result was no longer killing 1,000 enemies and losing 800 of their own, but killing 1,000 enemies and losing 2,000. The anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations made it impossible for European American companies to directly purchase low-cost photovoltaic products from China. They had to resort to indirect purchases through third-party countries, giving birth to photovoltaic transit countries. China produces key components domestically and then invests in assembly plants in transit countries. After the products are assembled, they are sold to Europe and America, completing the indirect product input. The sales volume of Chinese photovoltaic companies has not decreased, but the profits have been slightly reduced. Some costs have even been shifted to European American photovoltaic companies. A few years after the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy measures, developed countries in Europe and America discovered that they were completely ineffective and their domestic photovoltaic installations lagged far behind China. Unable to compete or break away from dependence, this is the current situation of European American photovoltaics in competition with China. At this point, they have only two choices. One is to lift the blockade and allow Chinese products to enter the domestic markets directly. Although this approach would make money for Chinese products, it would enable rapid growth of domestic photovoltaic power generation. The other option is to increase the blockade and restrictions on China and even third-party countries. While it is difficult to say this approach is wrong, it requires directly competing with Chinese photovoltaics, measuring who has a strong foundation and capabilities. Europe and the United States made different choices at this time. In 2018, Europe decided to withdraw the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy duties on China and resume free trade with Chinese photovoltaics. This move also declared Europe's recognition of the failure of the blockade on Chinese photovoltaics, but the results were very positive. In the year, the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy duties were lifted. Europe's photovoltaic installations increased by 21.5% compared to the previous year, and the growth rate accelerated in subsequent years. Europe regained its position as a leader in environmental protection. The United States, on the other hand, made another choice. In 2017, with the slogan "Bringing Manufacturing Back," the then President Donald Trump initiated a Section 201 investigation against Chinese photovoltaics to protect the domestic photovoltaic industry, but the results were not good. In 2021, when President Biden took office, he once again pressured Chinese photovoltaics and even directly confiscated Chinese photovoltaic products, preventing them from entering the US market. Ultimately, 1,000 batches of products were restricted. Despite these repeated attacks on Chinese photovoltaics, the US photovoltaic industry still couldn't break away from China. In 2021, photovoltaic panels imported from Southeast Asia accounted for 85% of the total US imports. In January and February of 2022, this figure even reached 99%. They completely abandoned Chinese photovoltaic products and turned to Southeast Asia. However, this approach is merely self-deception. It is widely known that photovoltaics in Southeast Asia are established by Chinese companies operating in the region. They import core components from China, assemble them in Southeast Asia, and transform them into Southeast Asian products, bypassing US restrictions. For example, Jinko Solar established a factory in Malaysia to produce photovoltaic products as early as 2015. By 2022, the annual production capacity of photovoltaic cells at the Malaysian factory had reached 3 gigawatts, with photovoltaic module production capacity reaching 2.5 gigawatts. There is also JA Solar, which has factories in Malaysia and Vietnam. In Malaysia, the photovoltaic cell production capacity is 1.5 gigawatts, while in Vietnam, the silicon wafer and module production capacities have reached 1.5 gigawatts and 2.5 gigawatts respectively. Of course, there are other photovoltaic companies whose products are mainly sold to Europe and America. China's sales have expanded. Southeast Asian countries have profited and earned foreign exchange, while only American photovoltaic companies bear additional costs. In other words, photovoltaic modules exported to the United States are still produced in China. The more restrictions they impose on themselves, the more uncomfortable it becomes. The original plan was to ban China and then cultivate a domestic photovoltaic industry. However, they have not only failed to do so, but they have also nurtured Southeast Asia. This has infuriated them. So, in March 2022, the US Department of Commerce prepared to launch a circumvention investigation on photovoltaics in 4 Southeast Asian countries. Companies not in line with US interests won't be subject to punitive tariffs of up to 240%. However, this outcome did not bring down China and Southeast Asia, but instead left the US photovoltaic industry in shambles. Due to the hollowing out of US manufacturing, they have already lost much of their photovoltaic-related industries and production capacity, relying heavily on imports for raw materials. Therefore, by restricting Chinese and Southeast Asian photovoltaics, the US is essentially limiting its domestic industry. A US solar developer once said that developing a 100 megawatt project in the United States used to take 18 to 24 months, but now it takes 36 to 48 months. Why does it take so long? With our photovoltaics from Vietnam and China, they need to decide where to order raw materials 2 to 3 years in advance, whereas before, they only needed to do so 6 months to a year in advance. As a result, costs have increased by 20 to 30%. and US photovoltaic projects cannot bear the burden? In 2022, the US added only 18.6 million kilowatts of photovoltaic installations, 23% less than in 2021. This number is less than half of what Europe has. It is evident how badly the US photovoltaic industry has been affected. Consequently, the US had no choice but to submit to Chinese photovoltaics once again. In June of last year, the United States first allowed the import of photovoltaic modules from Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and exempted them from import tariffs for 24 months. Then, in early March this year, White House officials confirmed that the US had allowed the import of photovoltaic panels from China. This measure also signifies that the US photovoltaic industry has completely lost its confidence in competing with China. So the question arises, if the US and Europe can't do without Chinese photovoltaics, why do Chinese companies still need to build factories in the US? Frankly, it's because they are forced to. After 2018, the US raised the banner of a trade war, educating everyone. They called for the return of manufacturing and formed trade alliances, creating the original globalized industrial chain model. Everyone no longer relies solely on globalization, but instead begins to protect and support their own manufacturing industries, reducing dependence on others. Under this backdrop, China's manufacturing strategy is also undergoing a transformation. In the past, they positioned themselves as the global manufacturing center, exporting cheap industrial products to the world. As long as Chinese products were inexpensive and of good quality, they did not worry about not being able to sell them, which has the product export model. However, due to the impact of anti-globalization, price and quality are no longer the main factors, and considerations such as local industry necessity have become important. China's future product exports will become more and more difficult, so the manufacturing industry is actively transforming, moving towards a higher-end, more technologically advanced direction. Another shift is from a single product export to a dual export of products and industrial capabilities. This is the manufacturing export model, where building factories in major markets is one way of exporting industrial capabilities. Photovoltaics is a typical example. Photovoltaics play a crucial role in energy security, and every country's emphasis on energy is no less than that on national defense and military affairs. This is also the reason why China's photovoltaic industry has encountered so many blockades. Taking Europe as an example, although they have already opened up free trade in photovoltaics with China, they have never given up on supporting their domestic photovoltaic industry. In December 2022, the European Commission established the European Solar Industry Alliance, planning that by 2025, Europe's newly installed photovoltaic capacity will reach 320 gigawatts and 600 gigawatts by 2030. However, there is another goal here, which is to achieve a photovoltaic manufacturing capacity of 30 gigawatts in Europe by 2025. This is just a preliminary plan, and they have explicitly stated that they will create a complete solar photovoltaic value chain in Europe. If Europe wants to achieve domestic production capacity, let alone the United States, in other words, if Chinese photovoltaics want to sell to more countries, investing in local factories in the future is an essential path. Just like BYD building factories in Thailand and in Europe, it is a path that must be taken. The US photovoltaic market will grow at a 40% market share annually. With a huge market space, it is in line with both China's manufacturing industry's overseas strategy and the interest of photovoltaic enterprises to build factories in the US. Secondly, the overseas expansion of Chinese photovoltaic companies is also beneficial to the consolidation of their industrial chain. Although Chinese photovoltaics is in the first tier, it does not mean that they're invincible. Just like Japanese technology, they always want to monopolize the industry's profits, but often other countries abandon Japan's path. The same is true for photovoltaic companies. Chinese companies occupy an absolute dominant advantage, but Europe and the US will not easily admit defeat. They continuously support their domestic photovoltaic industry chain, and they even bet heavily on next generation perovskite technology, ready to overtake on a curve and anytime. Southeast Asian countries, although sharing common interests with China, are also plotting to replace them with low-cost assembled products. With anti-globalization as a roadblock and pursuers like Europe, the US, Japan, South Korea, India, and Vietnam, Chinese photovoltaics indeed cannot be overly arrogant. Photovoltaic giant TCO public called for photovoltaic production capacity is concentrated in China and Southeast Asian countries, while the main markets are in Europe and the United States. To avoid the risks of trade barriers, Chinese photovoltaic companies should build overseas factories as soon as possible, build global capabilities, and gain larger market space. Of course, some Chinese people may worry about technology leaks. These concerns are definitely there, and Chinese government is formulating relevant laws and regulations. For example, on December 30th, 2022, the official website of China's Ministry of Commerce published the China Prohibited Export and Restricted Export Technology Catalog draft for public comments, which lists large-size silicon wafer technology, black silicon preparation technology, and ultra-high efficiency ingot monocrystalline or polycrystalline processes as restricted export technologies. For these Chinese companies, only by refining their inner strength and perfecting it can they be fearless. It doesn't really matter whether Chinese photovoltaic companies go to the US or not, since it's just an assembly plant, but the global layout of Chinese photovoltaic companies is crucial for the future of their photovoltaics. If Chinese photovoltaics can succeed in the US, it will encourage more and more Chinese enterprises to bravely go out and build factories. In the past, foreign companies built factories in China, relying on technological advantages to reap huge profits from China. But now, Chinese companies also begin to venture out, showcasing China's advanced technology and highly efficient production capacity.